Hi, welcome. My name is Stephanie, and today we are doing episode 2 of my TBR Rewind series, where I'm tackling my TBR from bottom to top. And the book on this week's docket is The Outsider by Stephen King. So let me read you a short summary of this book. An 11-year-old boy's corpse is found in a town park. Eyewitnesses and fingerprints point unmistakably to one of Flint City's most popular citizens. He is Terry Maitland, Little League coach, English teacher, husband, and father of 2 girls. Detective Ralph Anderson, whose son Maitland once coached, orders a quick and very public arrest. The case seems ironclad, especially when Anderson and the district attorney are able to add DNA evidence to go with the fingerprints and witnesses. But Maitland has an alibi, and it turns out his story has incontrovertible evidence of its own. So I have read several of Stephen King's books in the past. I do enjoy his writing style, though in general I am not that much of a fan of the horror / supernatural that he has in some of his other works. But I'm interested to see how this goes. It sounds almost more like a detective story, so let's get started. And we're back. So I have finished reading The Outsider by Stephen King last night, so let's chat. So the book is broken up into several parts. I was actually quite annoyed there's no table of contents, so I can't tell you how many parts there are, and I'm not going to go back and count them, but it's several, probably at least 8 or so. But I think realistically, it can probably be broken up into 3 major parts. So the first part is going to be the crime thriller detective novels. So this is at the beginning of the book when the crime happens, when the arrest happens. You have the lead detective, Ralph Anderson, who's making a large part in this, a few other detectives, and you have Bill Samuels, I believe, the district attorney. So it feels like a crime novel. Then about a third of the way through, maybe a little less than that, you start to get this psychological mystery part. So this is where all the facts have been laid out. It seems very clear-cut. However, the main perpetrator in the book, Terry Maitland, who, by the way, that is a throwback to Beetlejuice, right? The Maitlands? I've never seen that name anywhere else except Beetlejuice. Anyway, the perpetrator has an alibi that negates all of this physical evidence that they have at the crime scene. So then you start to think about, okay, well, if he didn't do it, then who did it? And where's this other person going to come from? And then I start getting worried. It's going to be a deus ex machina and it's going to come out of nowhere. But and then we get towards the end of the book where it really pivots into his traditional supernatural horror genre. I think that is a unique part of the book, is that you get 3 distinct genres within one book. I think that makes it more of an interesting read, captures your attention. You don't have just the same core themes that you would get from those specific genres individually. Character highlights. So this happens to be the first in a series, which I was not aware of until I read it. But the main characters are, I mentioned, the lead detective, Ralph Anderson, the district attorney, Bill Samuels, who sort of in and out, not a major character, a few other police detectives, Terry Maitland's lawyer, Howie Gold, who sort of orchestrates a lot of people coming together rather than plays a major role. There's Alec Pelly, who is the lawyer's investigator, and then Alec hires Holly Gibney, who is an investigator in another state where the story leads, and she does investigation in that state. And that's how we're introduced to Holly Gibney. And this is actually the first in the Holly Gibney series. Most of the characters are the male detectives and or lawyers, plus their wives. Suspect Terry Maitland and his wife, and the children play somewhat of a role as well. So Holly Gibney is really the main central female character, and she only shows up probably about halfway through the book. if not the last 1/3. But she brings a lot of interest to the book. She does a lot of the investigation that ties a lot of things together. She is the one who harbors in the supernatural part, since she has had some experiences in prior cases that lead her to believe one thing about the story. So the main themes, the first is the fragility of being certain about something. So a lot of physical evidence is told to us, fingerprints, DNA, video, eyewitness accounts. Yet there is a very solid alibi that negates Terry could have been there at the time of the crime. So what happens when the facts contradict each other? And part of Ralph Anderson's journey, the lead detective, is about learning just because you have evidence doesn't mean that always leads you to the truth, at least in this world. And maybe there are alternative explanations to what you are seeing with your eyes. Another theme is public judgment and the mob mentality. This is more, again, in the beginning of the book in terms of the crime part. As you can imagine, in this small community, when Terry is arrested so publicly, the community automatically condemns him. They believe the police, they believe the evidence that they've been told, and their friends are eyewitnesses of seeing Terry in the vicinity of when this crime took place. So there is a rush to judgment for sure. And in addition, being a small town, there's a lot of media sensationalism. There's a scene that has a pivotal turn in the book where they are leading Terry into the courthouse for his arraignment or his trial, I can't recall. The media is all over the place, and that leads to a situation where something happens that I wasn't expecting. It was a choice. I wouldn't say it changed the trajectory of the story. It was a choice. And then lastly, we have evil. So usually in terms of a crime, especially those against children, usually the perpetrator of the crime is evil in human form. The outsider, as the title of this book, represents evil as something different than the human form. There is a horror that feels mythic and supernatural, right? Rather than a criminal that is a human. The strengths of the book, I really enjoyed how it opened. I really enjoyed the first part of the book, crime detective part. I thought it was very gripping, pulls you right in. You're set in the scene where this man is arrested. You're like, great, open and shut case. Why is this book 500 pages long? And so obviously, you know, something else is going to happen. But Stephen King really does have a grasp on the mastery of writing. He doesn't simplify the language too much. You are expected to make connections and understand what's going on. The story is unique with what the villain is, who the villain is, and how that intersects with plot lines and other characters. The Holly Gibney character, knowing now that this is part of a series, I don't think her character was that strong of a presence in this book to make me think, oh, this is going to be a series about this character. She comes in very late. I enjoyed her. I liked her energy. I thought this was just a one-off book until I saw on Goodreads that it was part of a series. Some critiques of the book. Some may not like the multiple genres within the book or books that do genre melding. You may or may not like that aspect of the book. I think the book starts off probably more interesting than it ends, but that may be my bias based on the type of genre that I normally like. I don't think the ending of the book was all of that complex. It was more so just going through the motions needed to find this being, to do what we needed to do, etc. There are some events that happen towards the end of the book that are a shock factor. I didn't think they added to the story much. I didn't think they were necessary to happen. Potentially, that was also King's nod to, well, there's not a whole lot going on here. We just have to do these tasks to finish the book. So let me throw these things in here just to make you go, what? And so I think that was kind of a weakness of the book. And then lastly, but maybe most importantly, I have read several Stephen King books, and I hadn't noticed this theme in some of them. This intersection between sexual activities and children. Hopefully that doesn't get this video. And this really came to light when I watched a video by Elizabeth of Plant-Based Bride. And I think it was an older video, but she had read several Stephen King books back to back as she had not read any before. And she had brought up this prevailing theme of these acts with children, about children, around children. And again, not necessary, not something that added to the story or even was a large part of the story. There is an aspect of it that something that comes along that ties back to this supernatural character that, again, I think wasn't necessary. They could have used some other element rather than one that has more of a connotation towards the carnal. And so I was kind of disappointed seeing that again, having it in the back of my mind. And I'm not sure what the point of it is, but I think it really is a turnoff for me and definitely a trigger warning. Overall, I gave Stephen King's The Outsider 3.25 stars. I thought the writing was well done, so I did want to give it credit for that. And I thought most of the story was interesting and kept my attention. I read it within a week, I believe, so it moved quickly, had a fast pace, but due to some of the weaknesses I mentioned, didn't feel the need to rate it any higher than that. All right, so what's up next for episode number 3? So that will be, put it up on the screen here, A Walk Around the Block by Spike Carlson. Let me read you a synopsis. A simple walk around the block set journalist Spike Carlson off to investigate everything he could about everything we take for granted in our normal life, from manhole covers and recycling bins to bike lanes and stoplights. In this celebration of the seemingly mundane, Carlson opens our eyes to the engineering marvels, human stories, and natural wonders right outside our front door. So that sounds like an interesting little nonfiction. It is 328 pages, so shouldn't take too long. So I hope you've enjoyed this review of Stephen King's The Outsider. If you have, please feel free to like and subscribe if you are interested, and stay tuned for episode 3 of the TBR Rewind series. Have a great day.